listening to Over the Oxer podcast with Tracy Cole for all things to do with the mind for equestrians. I want to talk this time about what to do if your mindset practice isn't working. And I'm just going to apologise because I've got a really heavy cold at the moment, so I probably sound like I've got a really heavy cold. But I thought it was good to get this idea out there because as riders, we're just seeing the start of a new season. So it doesn't matter if you're in the Northern Hemisphere or the Southern Hemisphere, seasons are changing. We're thinking about changes in routine. Sometimes that impacts on our mindset. So what happens if you've been practicing? You've been doing lots of mindset work. Maybe you've been doing some breathing practice or some mindfulness. Maybe you've been journaling. Maybe you've been doing something else that you thought would have a bigger influence on the way that you ride. And maybe the mindset work is working whilst you're doing it. But then when you get on the horse or you get near the stables, everything sort of unravels. So first of all, if your practice isn't working, then we need to reflect on the approach. So there might be still some roadblocks, let's say, such as negative self-talk. Have you still got that? Because that really does sway things quite strongly. So think about that negative self-talk. Can you override it? Well, you can, but you have to do it very actively. And each time you say to yourself, even if it's like a whiff of a statement. It may not come to you like I'm speaking to you now. It may not come in that style of speech. It may just be a quick flutter through your mind. But if it's negative, you can say delete, delete, delete. Alternatively, you fill your head with something, and it doesn't matter what it is. You fill it with something. So there's absolutely no room for those automatic thoughts and that self-talk to creep in. The next thing that you might think about is your goals. Are your goals vague or very, very ambitious? Maybe too ambitious. So if your goals are vague, you might know already that your unconscious mind is the part of the mind that's the goal getter. Those types of things, it works out a way, even if you don't know the way. But if your goal is very vague, I'd like to be a better rider, for instance, is vague. But if you said, I'd like to score 60% on my dressage tests, that's a little bit more specific. And so you may need to go back and really have a think about your goals. And I would advise you to write them down. I know it's boring. I know it's laborious. But when you write them down, your thought processing slows down and you start to add in things and you start to get inspirations. And it actually works out in the long term, a much shorter process. What about if your goals are overly ambitious? Well, it's fantastic to have big goals, but some people's minds have a filter that kick those out. So, for instance, your conscious mind, your rational mind, your logical mind has set this beautifully big goal, but your unconscious mind is set up in such a way that it rejects it. It just thinks, oh, that's far too big. I'm not even going to contemplate that. In that case, cut it down, chunk it down. Make sure that your goal is maybe a stepping stone to a bigger goal. So if you set tiny goals, your unconscious mind will think, yeah, I could probably do that. I could probably get on with that. And then set another one and set another one and set another one. And you will get to that ambitious place. If it's meant for you, you will get there. But setting the huge goal initially may be a bit of a turn off for the mind. Have a think about what you're currently doing in terms of not only your self-talk and your goals, but how often you are actually doing a bit of mindset stuff. So it's really easy to do 30 seconds and think that's enough. And for some people it will be, but for most people we're talking minutes. Now, it doesn't have to be minutes that are specifically set aside. It could be, but it could be minutes whilst you're cooking, minutes whilst you're doing something very automatic like mucking out. It could be, what works really well is that time when you're just waking up. And when you're just waking up, do 5 or 10 minutes, because you'll be a little bit kind of in that daydreamy state, which will be just perfect. Actually, the work that you do there will be more valuable. And so think about your practice. If you're doing once a week, then for some people, again, that may be okay. And for other people, that's nowhere near enough. In a perfect world, if you want to change your mindset, you need to be doing it every day. And you need to be doing 5 to 15 minutes every day. And that may seem like quite a lot, but it depends on, if you think about in the long term, having this problem go on and on and on and on, and only doing a minute mindset every day and never really getting over whatever it is you want to get over, compared to spending a bit of time in the shorter term really, really tackling this. And then you won't have to do so much. So nowadays, I don't really do a lot of mindset where I sit down and I purposefully do some, brain gymnastics or whatever. I don't do that very often. I might do it a few times a week, but it's more that I enjoy doing it than I have to do it. So you will get to a point where you don't need it as much, and it becomes something that actually is quite pleasant to do, just like daydreaming is quite pleasant to do every now and again. Have a think about any external factors that might be impacting your riding mindset. Very often people come to me with riding problems. They have a fear, they have an anxiety, they have self-doubt. But actually, when we analyse it a little bit deeper, it's much broader as a problem. So it's not necessarily the fear or the anxiety, the self-doubt, whatever it might be, that they think it is. It's just that it's brought out in the riding. It's made much more obvious because this is a time that we want to enjoy, and it's very, very in our face when we don't enjoy it. So have a think. What is happening maybe in terms of other stressors in your life? Is what's happening when you ride a symptom for other areas of your life? And that would be true for something like a limiting belief as well. So do you have limiting beliefs that are quite broad? For instance, I'm not good enough, or I can't do that, or I'll never be able to do it. Those things tend to run across different parts of our lives rather than being in one part of our life. And so it might be that you need to tackle that. How about a lack of accountability? If you don't have a goal that you've shared with other people, or a goal that has specific dates to it, for instance, if you're going to enter a competition, or you're going to start training sessions, or you're going to go to a specific clinic, all of those things have quite specific dates on them, and it makes you work harder. Whereas if it's a vague timescale, I like to, ride more confidently this season, then we don't necessarily have that day-to-day accountability that we might need. Some people need it, and again, some people don't. But maybe you could hold yourself accountable. How many times a week do you want to ride? How many times a week do you ride? And it's not about beating yourself up, it's about hitting targets. So there may be genuine reasons for not riding 1 week or 2 weeks, and it might be the weather or something else. And these can't be helped. That's life. We're not necessarily trying to force ourselves. But what we are trying to do is have some kind of check And maybe it's better if you have somebody else who kind of checks in on you. And again, not in a judgmental way. And maybe it's an instructor or a trainer, or maybe it's your friend or your partner, or anybody else, that you just have that accountability. What about if the practice that you're doing isn't quite right for you? Now, most people find things like mindfulness and visualization really, really useful and really, really helpful. But what if you don't? So, for instance, journaling is the one that often has a sticking point. And I must admit, in days gone by, I have journaled a lot. But now I have less time. And so journaling is something that takes time. And I think, I'll just think it. I'll just think it rather than write it, which is not the best way. But visualization was always something that I found very difficult. Basically because I didn't see very well. I couldn't visualize. I couldn't see the stuff. I could feel it. I had an impression, and I could hear, for instance, I could hear the footfall, or I could hear things around me, but I couldn't really see it. And what I did see was kind of grey blobs. It wasn't very clear. And so I shied away from visualization. But recently I've come back to it, and the more I do it, the better it is. And sometimes I've visualized for maybe less than 5 minutes, and wow, do I feel motivated. And I'm starting to see things so much more clearly. I mean, I just didn't have colour before, and now I've got colour. I can see a broader field of view. It's really coming together. So it may be that either you just need to practice a bit more, or that you haven't found the right techniques. So have a little think about what techniques you actually enjoy, because those are the ones you're going to do. So if I said to you, visualize for, an hour every day, you're not probably going to do it. I wouldn't do it. Find something that suits you. For some people, this is mindfulness. It's sitting in nature. It might just be sitting in the garden. And if it's cold, it's just sitting in the garden with a hot drink, with your coat on, and just admiring nature. It might be sitting somewhere at the yard or the barn or the farm, and just being at one with nature. Just sitting in your horse stable, just take a little stool in and just sit and stare at the bedding, stare at your horse, and just release everything. Just don't think of anything at all in particular. It may be that you prefer something like hypnosis and you want something guided. So I do a rider hypnosis, I do personalise, but I also have one that's just a generic one that you can buy. If you're really in need of other techniques, I would say seek professional help, especially an NLP practitioner, because they will be able to give you lots of quick and easy techniques that are quite fun to do. And they don't take too long, and you can practice those every day. Of course, all of this takes time. It's not instantaneous, and it takes different amount of time for different people. So we're doing this all the time with a degree of self-compassion. Now, I just want to say a word about some people who store their emotions in their physical body. So, for instance, they may store the anger as a tightness in their jaw, or they clench their fists, or they feel tightness in their chest. They may feel anxiety in terms of their stomach always being upset. Tense shoulders, shoulders up around your ears. And watch out for the high functioning anxiety, because it may be that you go through life completely normally, but actually when you check into yourself, you're constantly on high alert. Sadness may feel like a heavy chest. You might even feel like you've got a lump in your throat. Fear could be shallow breathing and muscle tensions. But you can also have aches and pains, particularly neck, shoulder and back aches. And if this has a real cause, so for instance, you know the cause, you've fallen down or something and you've hurt yourself, then that's not the same. But if it has no real cause, or this tightness, this pain should have disappeared by now, the doctor says it'll take 6 weeks and it's now 12 weeks and you still feel the same, it could be that your emotions have been stored in the body. And those unresolved emotions are basically there because your mind is saying to you, if I make it painful, you'll pay attention. The trouble is that we don't realise that. What the mind is really saying is, look, pay attention not to the pain, but to the emotion. And sometimes it's hard for us to know what exactly that emotion is. And if that's you, then again, I can do something to help you there. Or look out for a master practitioner of timeline therapy, because they will be able to help you very, very easily release that unresolved emotion, which will let go of the pain, which again will help your mindset. A key place for riders where emotions are stored is in the psoas muscle. So it's PSOAS, psoas muscle, and it sort of wraps around your thighs and your pelvis. And for that one, there are exercises that you can do. So search out somebody who is a fitness trainer, somebody who's maybe a yoga instructor or Pilates instructor, and have a look for some simple exercises that can release sometimes the more negative emotions of things like sadness, anxiety, and so on, that can get stored in that muscle, and obviously then have an impact on how we ride in terms of our physicality. I hope that's given you some inspiration, some food for thought to keep going on your mindset journey, because I'm sure riding is at least 80% mindset at times. So we need to get our mind in gear before we get our body. Thanks ever so much for listening. Take care, and I'll see you again really soon.